The Silent Neighbours, Part 5. The reflection in the glass stared back at me, dark shapes stretching like silhouettes from another world. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the room was empty. The figures I'd seen were gone. But the sensation of being watched, of being surrounded by unseen eyes, didn't leave. I backed away from the window, trying to make sense of what was happening. But nothing made sense anymore. My phone buzzed again, and with trembling hands, I picked it up. The same unknown number. It's time, you know what you have to do. I felt the colour drain from my face as a surge of dread coursed through me. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here anymore. I had to leave. I had to get out before whatever was in this place consumed me too. But just as I was about to turn the knob, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of scraping, louder than ever. But this time, it wasn't just one direction. The sound was coming from every corner of the apartment. Something was moving inside the apartment. I felt the vibrations underneath my feet. It was as though the building itself was alive, breathing, shifting. The tapping started again. This time it wasn't just faint, it was clear. It was right behind me. I turned around in a panic, but there was nothing there, except for the dark shapes standing in the corners of the room. They weren't just shadows anymore. They were people. Or what was left of people. They stood motionless, their faces hollow, their eyes vacant. They didn't move, but they were watching me. Their skin seemed stretched, their bodies warped. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. These were the tenants, the ones who had come before me. The scraping grew louder, as if something in the walls was reaching for me. I backed toward the door, my breath catching in my throat. No, I whispered, trying to keep the panic at bay. I can't stay here, I won't end up like them. But they moved, slowly, deliberately, their heads tilted toward me, and I heard the sound again. The scraping, this time from above. I reached for the door, but before I could open it, the landlord's voice cut through the air. It's too late. I spun around to find him standing in the doorway, his face pale. The emptiness in his gaze mirrored the same hollow look I'd seen in the figures. You shouldn't have come here, he said, his voice low and almost mechanical. It knows you now. I tried to speak, but the words died in my throat. The air felt too thick to breathe. The building was closing in on me, the walls pushing in. It never lets anyone leave, he said. Not without taking them, not without making them part of the walls. You were chosen. I looked at him, my chest tight with fear. I tried to warn you, I tried to help you, but it's too strong. It's been here for decades, longer. It doesn't forget. It never forgets. The scraping grew louder again, and the figures in the room began to move toward me. Their twisted forms creaked like old wood, their bodies contorting unnaturally. The walls themselves seemed to shift, the lines of the room warping. It was all happening at once. The noise, the movement, the walls closing in. Suddenly the landlord reached out, his hand clamping around my wrist with an iron grip. It's time, he whispered, his voice full of resignation. Before I could react, the light above flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. I don't know how much time passed. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the floor, the room eerily still. The scraping had stopped. The figures were gone. The landlord was no longer there. I stood shakily, my head spinning. I stumbled toward the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. But as I stepped into the hallway, I realized something. Nothing had changed. The hallway was still the same, but everything felt wrong. The shadows were darker, the walls seemed closer, and I could still hear the tapping. I turned around, but the door to my apartment had disappeared. There was no trace of the building I had just been in. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of me. I was trapped. The tapping grew louder. I looked around, my mind racing. I realized with growing horror that the building had become my prison. I wasn't just trapped inside the apartment anymore. I was trapped inside the walls, inside the building itself. The scraping started again, and I knew then what the landlord had meant. I wasn't going to leave. Not ever. Follow for more stories coming soon.